Good morning, everyone from California, and this is indeed a great pleasure for me to hosting this conversation with global ethnodoxologists, multicultural worship leaders, musicians, artists, and missionaries who have a heart to reaching out nations through their artistic gifts. And today is the topic which we are talking about, Lausanne for Conference and Multicultural Worship. Recently, just last week, I think a week ago, there was a Lausanne Congress Movement 4 gathering in Incheon, Korea for the global mission work. But before going to that, I will just like to read that this is the vision which Bible has already provided us. May the people praise you. God, may all the people praise you. Psalm 67, verse 3 to 5. And then the same image and a picture reminded in the book of Revelation, chapter 7, 9 to 10. A multitude of people from every nation, tribe, people, and languages stand before the throne and the Lamb, wearing white robes and holding palm branches. They cry out in a loud voice, salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb. So from September 22, 29, Fourth Lausanne Congress Movement gathered. More than 200 nations were presented at L4 with a gathering of more than 5,000 people. For 2 weeks, the 50th anniversary of the Lausanne Movement was started, which was started actually by Billy Graham in 1974. Then they have a second gathering in Manila, then 1989, then Cape Town 2010, and then Seoul, Korea. So concerning worship, people, those who are here, I'll briefly invite them to introduce themselves. However, worship is always the heart of Christian missions. And we have various statements. And we have Nairobi statements about 1996 about a worship, which states that worship is beyond culture. It is contextual. It is countercultural. And it is cross-cultural. Nairobi has given this framework. And I'm just going to quote from Seoul statement on worship, what they are stating in the para 36. It stated that worship, therefore, is just one of many other church practices, but the church's foundational practice. Worship is the ultimate end to which all our mission endeavors are directed. The work of mission will end when Jesus returns, but worship will continue forever. So we call on all churches to give greater attention to worship as a foundational practice and to make worship a more corporate experience through their preaching, prayers, and songs. So the L4 president, Michael O, states in his interview, what happened, quotation, what happened in Seoul in 2024 will impact the world in 2050. So they are envisioning the next 25 years. And for 3 reasons they are giving us. Number 1, humble listening. Together is better, and the power of the gospel. And this conversation is about the past, the present, and the future of ethnodoxology or multicultural worship in a global context. It is my indeed honor. We have esteemed guest here with us. So I will invite one by one our friends to please introduce yourself, your name, your ministry, and your location, and then we will delve into our conversation. Let's start, ladies first. Joanne.
Okay, greetings everyone from Kingston, Jamaica. And my name is Joanne Richards Goff. I attended L3, that's in Cape Town in 2010, as one of the worship leaders. My daily work has to do with what we call ethnodoxology. So it's promoting and facilitating worship in a culturally relevant expressions of worship. I'm founding director of Crew 44. Crew is an acronym for culturally relevant expressions of worship. And 44 is from Isaiah chapter 40, verse 4, which says, every valley shall be filled and every mountain and hill shall be brought low. And so we want to see everyone with having equal access to worship from the heart in the worship space.
Thank you. Deborah.
Hello, my name is Yeonhee Deborah Kim from Seoul, South Korea, the host country of L4. I'm working as an ethnodoxologist and mostly work in African countries, but also I'm working in Korea as a director of Arts in Mission Korea, which is a mission organization that mobilizes and trains Korean Christian artists for God's kingdom and cross-cultural mission. Now, at this moment, I'm in one of the North African countries.
Wonderful.
Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Thank you. Jabu?
Yes, greetings from Clarkston, Georgia, in the United States. And I'm multicultural worship leader and serving as one of the leaders at Proskuneo Ministries. Proskuneo means worship in New Testament Greek language, and we are focusing on Jesus-centered multicultural worshiping communities, sharing the vision of it and sharing the practicality of how to cultivate that and multiply that around the world.
Wonderful. Dr. Ed?
Greetings, and I'm greeting you from Southern California as well. I'm a part of the Brehm Center for Worship, Theology, and the Arts at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena. My background is I'm a musician. I have degrees in church music conducting, but my master's and doctoral work was all theory composition. And I've spent half of my life in academic institutions and the other half of my life in for over 20 years in one of the non-denominational mega churches in the country as a pastor of worship and arts. And I'm a bit of an outsider of this conversation, and I'm the only one in this group that has not spent significant time living outside of the US culture, though I've been to 25 or 30 countries. And so I bring some of my own confessions of ignorance and misuse in this topic, and wish I had done better in some ways, but always on a continual learning path, which I have learned a lot in the last 15 or 20 years. So I appreciate so much this gathering to be able to converse about this important topic.
Thank you very much. Dr. James?
Hello, my name is James Crable. I spent about half of my adult life living in West Africa, working and learning from African-initiated churches, and also participating in collecting and preserving some of the hymnology, indigenous hymnology of some of these churches that has been passed down for many years in oral form. I was invited there to collect some of these and to create some materials that could help the church in strengthening its worship patterns. So more recently, I live in the States. I live in Indiana, which is a flyover state, but if you do that, you're going to miss out on meeting some great people. I teach at a number of different places, including Dallas International University in their PhD program in world arts.
Well, thank you very much. Let me introduce myself. My name is Eric Sarwar, originally from Pakistan, but from last more than a decade, I'm in the United States of America, and I'm serving as a musician, missionary, missiologist, and a minister in the Indian Pakistani immigrant churches, and currently serving as the president of the Tahleem School of Church Music and Worship in Pakistan as well. Well, today's conversation is about L4. And L4 means, those who are unaware, it's a Lausanne movement started, and they just have a gathering over there. And we have two our friends here in this panel, those who were in person, they were experiencing what's happening over there. So let's start with them, and that will ignite our conversation. So Dr. James, let's start with you. How was your experience, and what's happened over there, and what your experience, ethnomusicological eyes have seen over?
So just to correct one aspect or add to one aspect that was already presented, there were over 5,000 people present. There were another 5,000 people online. So this was really a very large gathering of global Christians trying to understand God's mission in the world. That was a primary purpose. but also participating in multiple seminars and plenary presentations, in multimedia events, and then also in worship of fairly large substance in terms of the number of hours, times that were spent. So I was at a table. We were all sitting at tables that were assigned, pre-assigned. We had people from different places around the world at our table with very different experiences, ranging from people who were acquainted with Orthodox worship to an Anglican church leader from Tanzania, from Uganda, and then a woman from Nagaland in Northeast India. We had quite a spectrum of people from work among Muslims and different people, about 6 or 7 people around the table. And of course, in discussions, what we spent our time doing was bringing to the table, literally, our different experiences. I think we anticipated that the worship experience would do the same thing. The point in trying to find out how you worship with 10,000 people is a massive challenge. But one of the key phrases that brought us together and that guided this conference was our responsibility to declare and display the people of God, the gospel in the people of God as we seek to be faithful to God's calling. So what does it mean to display the variety that we represent? We can declare through our actions and so on, but displaying also means that you demonstrate to the world the diversity of God's people that have emerged. And I think a lot of us were hoping that some of that would happen in worship. The worship times were loud and vibrant, but really focused on what we all felt was a portion of God's people in terms of musical styles and languages. And as some people at our table said, it felt like a missed opportunity to experience the global church. And again, you can't please 10,000 people, and that's not the point. The point is how do we display the people we've become to the watching world? And there would be ways to do that. And I think at this particular gathering, there was a feeling from some people that it didn't happen.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. So Deborah, let's hear your voice. Dr. James just mentioned about the missed opportunity by displaying the vitality and the globalization of the mission. So what was your experience in this regard?
Well, I can relate to that. On the surface, the operation of the L4 was quite sophisticated in many ways. You know, nice design and musically, technically, very great. However, I did not feel that the L4 fully captured or represented the cultural and artistic diversity of the global church. During the Congress, there were about 12 worship sessions from Sunday evening to Saturday morning, almost 12. But nearly all songs were from the Western traditions, Euro-American, I cannot say it exactly, but the Western tradition, with almost all the lyrics sung in English, except for just a few lines. Additionally, while there were some well-known songs, many pieces were unfamiliar. So, for example, if their intention was let's pick the songs, the worldwide well-known top 10 song. And then we can all together sing. We can sing together, all together. That makes sense. But many pieces were very unfamiliar, so it was not easy to engage with the worship service. Also, I met some Korean participants. They're struggling with the singing the unfamiliar English song in English. They can understand the message because there was a translator, but in the worship we have to sing the songs, but it was not easy to get involved in the worship service. Not just many Koreans, but also other participants, they're struggling with the engaging with the worship service. I can relate to that. I mean, I can understand, the 5,000 participants, and then including virtual, the 10,000, but not just 10,000. There's more than almost 10 people. They are step of the L4. So actually, in person, more than 6,000 people were there for the Congress. So it was, so it's not easy to embrace all countries or all cultural aspect. I can understand that, but I feel that there should have been a more thoughtful planning and preparation process. Instead of having one or two bands consistently leading a similar music style, there could have been an effort to include a diverse selection that reflects the unique characteristics and the styles of different countries.
So
Yeah.
would you guys tell me, then I will go to, because right after, on that same note, actually, Deborah, I would like to go back to Joanne and Ed about their comments, because they were part of the L3 and the planning committee. But before that, briefly, so there were a 1 week gathering, and how many worship sessions were there, and how much time they were taking? Do you have any idea? Morning, evenings, worship session for a half an hour, or what was their time frame?
So as I mentioned, I counted almost 12 sessions, worship time. Time itself is very short, right, James? Just 10 or 15 minutes.
Okay.
It's not that long.
Hmm.
But in the morning session and evening session, each session has a short the worship session, praise and worship.
Okay, fine.
15-ish.
Yeah, well, okay, thank you very much. So this is interesting, because I know as we were discussing that, it's not easy to cater everyone and bring a menu for everybody, those who are there. But however, let's talk with Joanne, and then Ed, you can pitch in. What was your both experience at the planning of L3 in Cape Town, if I'm not wrong? Joanne, let's start with you. Please unmute your mic.
Sorry about that. Yes, so I was actually not a part of the planning for the worship in Cape Town. I was a part of the worship team. And so they sent me the songs. I was sent the list of songs. So in my mind, I was preparing myself to needing to learn different music genres, needing to learn to sing in different languages. I was preparing myself mentally. And then I got this list of songs. The vast majority of them were English songs originating in English-speaking spaces, Western type songs that are sung all over the world. And I was very disturbed, because as someone who studied ethnomusicology in a Christian context and operated as an ethnomusicologist on the mission field in West Africa and in the Americas, I understood that we can't all be singing the same songs with the same styles. And I mean, to be fair, effort was made to include other languages. So, we did have French, we did have, I think, Swahili or Zulu. Those may have been there because we were in South Africa as well. But the vast majority of the songs were not. And to be honest, I almost withdrew because I said, I cannot honestly be a part of this where we are not honoring the presence of the people from different parts of the world. And having been following the Lausanne movement from its early stages, I also knew that it was through this that we got the Joshua Project, which highlighted the unreached people groups. And I figured that between 1974 and 2010, we would now be having people who were reaped into the kingdom from all these unreached places. So I'm expecting now for us to be engaging these people. But unfortunately, that was not so. And I will say that I was also a virtual participant in L4. And I was shocked to see that it was even less of the global image and the atmosphere than we had in 2010. So that really, it pained my heart to see that happening. However, I must say that I appreciated the spirit in which the songs in L4, I mean, I know we're supposed to be talking about L3, but I did see, and I could not even hold myself together when we were singing Amazing Grace. I think all that had happened before the song came and everything. So it's one thing to be culturally relevant and meeting the needs of all the people there. But as you were saying in the beginning, that worship is also, did you say it's super cultural? I don't know if you had mentioned that one, but so that there is more to it. We could actually be using all the music of the people and still not be truly worshiping from our hearts. So, yeah.
Well, thank you
But
very
that
much.
was, yeah.
Probably one of the that's where Ed will reflect on that. Probably because mostly Lausanne, and especially this year, because the president is Korean, Michael O, and then the committee is also non-Western. Primarily, I don't know the whole committee, but it's my notion actually, my brief understanding. But probably Ed, would you comment on the worship planning committee and what is your experience at L3?
Yes, and again, I'm the one that's confessing some of my sins about this whole topic. But as Joanne knows, at L3, there were some conversations a couple of years in advance that she was a part of, I was not a part of, in terms of the worship plan for L3. There ended up being a disagreement in philosophy and between the leadership and the people who they were contracting with, and they separated ways. And so the leadership of Lausanne then kind of took over 12 to 14 months in advance and started a separate new conversation about the worship side of things. And it was determined at that time that the Lausanne gathering would be separated so that the opening and closing ceremonies would be one entity, and the worship services during the week would be another group of people that Byron Spradlin headed up. And Joanne was a part of Byron's multinational worship team to do the services between the Sundays. I ended up being responsible for the opening, closing ceremonies, and the mandate there was that the Africans were to be the leaders, and that my job was to work with the Africans to have their voice and their visibility be the primary thing. So that I made 6 trips to Cape Town and recruited Africans and talked to them and incorporated things, had some of them write music that I then arranged. We recruited, as Joanne will tell you, 40 dancers and 25 drummers and an orchestra and 2 choirs and a band and children. And they were all South African of not only black and white, but also the colored race that they identify themselves as, which are between. And a side comment, the opening choir that I ended up working with was from what they self-identify as the colored race, the mixed race. And they always say that they are the ones who are, whether the blacks are in power, they're minority. If the whites are in power, they'll still minority. And they were just thrilled that God just placed it somewhere in my connections to put a group of the colored race as leaders in the opening ceremony, which they say we never get to be leaders. So there were some things that we did, some of it intentionally, some of it by God's providence, that we put some people who don't normally get to lead from that culture in leadership roles. Now, what I will say is that because, again, I can only talk about the opening and closing ceremonies, there were so many things put in place. For instance, the opening ceremony was said to be, needs to be like a production that says, "Welcome to Africa."
Mhm.
And so that's what it was. It was not much worship per se. It was more presentational. They were honoring the 1910 mission meetings. This was the centennial. So I was asked to include "Crown Him with Many Crowns," for instance, which is the way they ended 1910. So they wanted to use that in, Cape Town. So then at the closing ceremonies, we were handed an African Anglican liturgy. And the Archbishop of Uganda, Henry Orambi, was the presider, who lost his voice midway through the closing ceremony. But, and he had certain things that he wanted. He wanted the creed to be spoken by everyone in English, for instance, and we were to design music around that. The preacher at the closing ceremony was from Wales, and he wanted a certain hymn chosen. There were so many things prescribed. It's sort of like you dump these elements in a bucket, and my job was, okay, how can I make this African, and have the Africans be the leader of this basket of resources. And I would say that for me, I wish I could do it over in one sense. In another sense, I'm sensitized because I know I was criticized by people for not including something Spanish. Well, how are you going to do that in that context? Or how are you going to include something from, any of these multitudinous cultures that are there? And part of me also thinks that we focus so much on the music, and I know I'm the musician, but there's so many other aspects to the worship experience that can be enculturated that are apart from music. But music always becomes a logical, and I understand it, a logical target for criticism as well as reception. And so, there were times in the planning of L3 where I thought, this is absolutely going to fall apart. It's not going to work. And I had personally, on 2 of my trips to Cape Town, when I was just sure it was going to fall apart, I literally had 2 rainbows on 2 different occasions that showed up visibly to me, which I felt like was God's sign to say, keep going. You're meeting the right people, you're encouraging the right people. And boy, it was a struggle from Pasadena to recruit 500 Africans to be leaders in just these 2 events. But one of the greatest experiences in my life to enable 40 dancers, 25 drummers, choir, orchestra to process in the closing ceremony from the corner of the room with baskets of bread made in South Africa, wine made in South Africa, to bring them to the table and to be dispersed was one of the most chilling experiences of my life.
Thank you
Right
very
or
much.
wrong, good or bad.
Well, thank you very much, Ed, for bringing this one up. While Ed was talking about 1910, let me give you some background. 1910, he's referring to a 1910 Edinburgh Mission Conference, which was a centennial celebration in the 2010 under the British colonial era. However, while we were talking about the nuances and not only a musical side, but also a preacher side and also the lots of other planning. We actually, at this moment, I would like to commend Lausanne for organizers, because organizing and gathering and this kind of huge work, it's not easy task. We are small
Mhm.
church pastors and a ministry leaders, and we know that even a small event of 100 to 200 people take your energy, and you need a lots of team and planning and conversations. So hats off, clapping to the managers and to the organizers of the Lausanne Movement 3 and 4 and beyond that one. So probably one which I'm hearing is the movement which now is a decolonizing mission and also decolonizing musicology. And this is one of the part of this conversation. Actually, during all this conversation, we heard that there was always a creative tension between these two cultures. One is dominant, one is dominant, and then how that both interplay with that. And that's the call of a multicultural worship leader. That's where Jevo Kim's voice coming in. How, as especially as a Korean, and then as a leader of the Prosecutor ministry and a multicultural worship. Jevo, what was your take, and what's your observation concerning that subject?
Yes. First, I want to make it clear that I have no intention to judge anyone's heart or motivation. And I'm pretty sure, as someone who was not there in person, I'm pretty sure, and I've been hearing the report that the great like experience that people had, regardless of what I believe or what I think, what I saw. But I did observe through live stream, and I also have obtained a list of songs through Deborah Kim, who's here because she was there. Um, so my main observation is only to focus on musical worship time. That's where I want to talk about. Um, so my surprise was, as somebody who knows how difficult and challenging it is to um, make it happen at such a diverse gathering of and diverse and historic gathering of global Jesus followers, such as L4. But I was somewhat surprised at how musical worship time was not so much integrated, or it appears that way to me, while the L4 focused so much missiologically on polycentric mission and collaboration. The musical worship part to me didn't appear that way, or it appeared lacking that missiological reflection in how worship songs were chosen or worship time was led by people. The very nature of L4 Congress was trying to integrate into speakers and planning team and all of that. In my observation, that was not demonstrated through musical worship time. For example, there was a two main band or team, Getty Band and a Korean band comprised of multiple Korean worship leaders. To my surprise, Korean worship team didn't sing a single song originally written in Korean, even though the Korean worship band consisted multiple worship leaders who's been writing very influential self-theologized Korean songs in Korean language. So my question is, was it their choice to try to be, radically hospitable host to rest of the people who are in that space, trying to sing familiar songs to people present in the room? Or was there some kind of direction? Was there some kind of pre-made set list that was given to them? Compared to Korean team, the Getty team appeared to sing many of their original tunes, which consist some well-known relatively well-known songs like In Christ Alone. But my heart music is also Western English origin songs, but I could not, like Deborah noted, I could not recognize some of the songs. It was their original tunes. So even for people to say, well, we have to sing songs in English origin because it's more familiar. Yes, it makes sense, but to gatherings in that scope with that diverse people from, different backgrounds, I think that could be also assumption that, if you choose these songs, that's familiar enough to the rest of the people. So I believe there was a risk either to find more monocultural, monolingual, unidirectional worship, or to attempt multicultural, multilingual, multidirectional worship in nature. I believe there was a risk in both natures, but what I've been disappointed is based on what appears to be is that lacking of the missiological reflection or collaboration in worship planning and leading.
Well, thank you, Jebu. So anybody have known, as you know, that who was the worship leader or planning? Do you know there was a committee or how these things work actually? I'm just trying to understanding the nuances as you were mentioning that as Ed and Joanne, you were telling that it started 2 years earlier. Before the L3. So how these things process actually, what is the procedures, how they do that, and how they pick a person who will do what? Do you have any idea?
I don't have any idea.
Okay.
I do know that, and here's my sense, I think Joanne would probably agree that there is not a voice at a high enough level with this kind of conversation that has the influence that's necessary to make anything different from what we've just described. That's my sense. And I'm not sure how to accomplish that, except whenever L5 comes along, it'll be the same unless somebody does have that voice of influence a long time in advance and at an extremely high level.
Well, one thing is sure. Yes, Joanne, please go ahead.
Yes, I was thinking that I think they should be open to being challenged about how to go about things in the future based on their own words. Because they spoke a lot about collaboration and how it's important to do things together. Together, we are stronger. That was said a lot. Now, there is such a thing as the Lausanne Arts Network. And I would imagine that things would have gone a bit differently if they had consulted, if the people at the top who make that kind of decision had consulted with the Lausanne Arts Network to get an understanding from them, some kind of respect for the professional field then of multicultural gatherings, multicultural experiences, and music and the arts within that kind of context. So perhaps that could happen moving forward, but I guess one of us within that space would need to challenge them.
Obviously, and I think this is what is happening right now. Probably, Dr. James, you are aware, and Ed, you are aware. While we were at Fuller annual missiology lectures, and even the CMR's breakfast, and even at the graduations, we have multicultural, multilinguistic songs. Even in at the American Society of Missiology, I have an opportunity to be part of the team. Also, then the GCAM, then even the Calvin Worship Symposium. There are various Vespers around the world which they bring various voices. So I think the movement is there. Actually, what Joanne and Ed and we are talking about is how to reach out to that ears, those who have a power of decision actually who will they bring and who will they bear out? So that bringing us to our conversation, to our last two concluding remarks, which is I would like to your comment on that. Why? Suppose that somebody in the higher in the higher realm, they said, okay, why we need this culturally diverse worship at Lausanne 5? What would be our answer? What is the significance? Why it is essential? Jebu or
Well,
James, whoever. Yes,
I'll
please.
just make two quick comments. I mean, one of them is that we have become a global family. And if we're going to experience what God has done in history and in our midst, then whenever we gather, there should really be a serious effort to taste that, to experience that. Theologically, there's also a vision that we get from Revelation 7 and elsewhere, that there is coming a day that God's preferred future sees people from different tribes, nations, languages gathered around the throne and praising the Lamb. So we have an actual reality that calls us to do something different, and we have a theological future that pulls us forward. And as Michael Hahn says, when we gather, we should be worshiping into God's preferred future. And there are ways to do that. I hope we have just a few minutes for some of these people on this call who have experience in organizing and facilitating worship that is multicultural, to say just a little word about how they do that. Because I honestly think some of the organizers probably didn't know how to get started, or it wasn't intentionally to promote a particular style. It was maybe lack of information or contacts for knowing how to move ahead. But we have people even on this call and elsewhere around the world who have done this in creative ways, and we need to begin to hear their voices.
Well, that's a valid point. It reminded me a story at the Hymn Society of Canada and North America when they launched 2014, when they launched this Glory to God Presbyterian hymn. And I was surprised to see there was not a single song or psalm from Pakistan. And I said, hey, what's this happening? Because India, Punjab was the first ever foreign mission for the Presbyterians in the 1830s. And so how come actually? And we have a book of Punjabi Psalter a century ago that decolonized, because India was the only mission field which pushed back the Western influence. And they have to surrender to the local musicology. And you know what answer given by the committee? Because the whole committee was there at the launching at the MCIT. And to my surprise, they said, actually, we try to contact through our Asia liaison that is there anyone from the Pakistan or that part of the world who can send us a song or a sample, and we found no one. More than a century old connections. And they found none from that region to add one single song in the Glory to God. That's interesting. Jebu, what's your take on this?
Yes, as a multicultural worship leader, what I'm trying to do is to provide a good example or good experiences, and that this can actually happen, because there's a lot of fear. Oh, well, then it's not going to be a worship, it's going to be mere cultural representation, and it's merely impossible to represent all cultures honorably and accurately. So it's better maybe not go that route. The problem with this theory, even though it makes sense, is that something will have to fill the vacuum. And in my own experience at Christian global gatherings where I was part of worship team, was that vacuum used to be filled with Western origin or English dominant songs. Time after time I experienced. There were another Christian gathering that I was part of as a worship team, but our team was only allowed to sing in Spanish, English, and French. So I could not bring my own song. in Korean language. So instead of just criticizing or my take is how can we persuade them? My experience is that theologically, people are not against of it, but when it happens actually in the room, it has to be culturally diverse, linguistically diverse, and yet still helping people to engage to the point it becomes their worship. So that's been very, very challenging and difficult part, as all of you probably know. But I think that process can really honor people. The question that I have about Korean team who led worship, portion of worship at Lausanne, there was a feedback from someone that I know that it seemed the Korean team had looked like they had less agency, while the other team appeared to have more agency, which is problematic. So how can we provide good experience, good worship experience at a conference like this, of course, which requires early planning and possibly global advisory committee or board, and listening ears and willingness to go to the more complicated yet difficult and rewarding route.
Mhm.
No, that's powerful because yes, Joanne, just a moment. Because as I mentioned the story, sometimes when I'm at a Calvin, whether it's a American Society of Missiology conference, whether it's a Calvin Worship Symposium, whether it's a GCAM or any all these global platforms, wherever I try to find out where are the other resources from my own context, which could be available to the larger global context, and there's a dearth of these resources also. So I think that is another kind of option or the reason actually why there are no more. But now things are changing. Things are lots of better through connection. Yes, Joanne, go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to share my story of how I became open to multicultural worship. Because I mean, I grew up in Jamaica with Western music in church, and this is what I was therefore comfortable with. So I went to GCOM, first GCOM, and I was very disturbed because in worship spaces they were bringing these Chinese and Arabic and different languages and different music styles that I wasn't comfortable with. And I said to myself, if these are being presented in workshops, then it would be fine. But this is time for everybody to worship. I can't worship using this music and this language. And so I was disturbed about that. I don't know what happened over the next 3 years, but the next time I came to GCOM in 2006, it's like I had now the understanding that the people for whom these languages were their heart language and this music was their cultural, their heart music, were actually my brothers and sisters represented in the room with me. It made a world of difference to my whole attitude toward singing and worshiping. So it made me able to worship, even though I didn't know the language and I didn't know the music genre. So, yes, I am hoping that just even that story and that would lead to an understanding that would help more people to embrace the concept that, Jewu in particular is talking about because he has the experience of working with multicultural worship. The other thing, though, is colonialism. And you spoke about the need to decolonize the worship spaces. And the problem is that many of us don't realize that we have been. And so therefore in L3, when they settled on a team, to look at the team looked extremely multicultural. You know, you had Korea represented, you had Kenya represented, you had, you know, different, we looked different. And so but we were all, like me, comfortable in our Western representations, you know, Western expressions of worship. So I had asked the question, which would have been better? To have a team that looked Western, but was identifying with the different musics of the world and languages, or a team that looked like you know, a representation of the Revelation 7:9 that James spoke about, but really on the inside have been fully colonized, and therefore this is their thing. And that is a real challenge, but I believe nothing is impossible. And the fact that we're having this conversation now gives me hope. I mean, after 2010, that was 14 years ago, I wrote this article outlining all of what I'm sharing now. And then I come to L4 online and I see that things have regressed. But the fact that we're having this conversation gives me hope that L5, if the Lord tarries, will be different.
Yes, and that's our, yes, Ed.
So quick comment on that. You know, so many things are decided beyond our control. We've talked about that. And, you know, for instance, I know there's a backstory to the reason why the Getty team was there. And it goes back actually to Keith's friendship with John Stott. And I don't need to go into that whole story, but, you know, we would have not had that at L3. That would not philosophically worked for us at L3. But that did dictate a lot of what happened at L4, because the Getty band was one of those bands. And here's a little microcosm for me. And again, you're all the experts and the voices that should be heard. But my desire, and some of this came through my Fuller Chapel exposure over 15 years, is that, you know, we all know songs because we're invested in them. We've sung them for decades. They're part of our history and our culture. And my encouragement to churches now, in just local churches, is to invest in certain songs, because there's a tendency to sing a non-white piece of music one time, you know, and then move on. And so it becomes, you know, we're doing a mile wide and a thimble deep in terms of our investment in music that's not English. And I'm encouraging worship leaders to find those songs that express the theology of their local church context that are not white, and that they invest in those songs. And much like at Fuller Chapel, we invested in Jay Wu's song, Ye Junim. That now is a part of Fuller culture. You know, we sing it as much as Amazing Grace, you know, so that's easier to do in a local church where you're meeting week after week after week than a Lausanne or a one-time conference. But I still think that a philosophy could be instituted in a Lausanne 5 to say, we're going to invest in the music and worship styles of these 4, 5, 6 cultures, and invest deeply in those to some extent, so that they could be more of a normative expression. And that probably takes a lot of backing up, learning the music, spreading the music, disseminating the music, recording the music, printing the music, you know, 2 years in advance, 1 year in advance, so the people who gather have a little bit of deeper understanding than just showing up and here's the song I don't understand and it went by and it's over. We need to find some ways of investing. And the problem is that we have this monolithic Western music worship business that is spreading around the world. And so it becomes the natural default. But if there's a way to create other little sub, you know, industries that are not just one language, And that becomes kind of a problem. How do you fund and disseminate a different kind of a business culture that can disseminate around the world, so that when people gather, there are those things. And people like Jay Wu does this masterfully with proskuneo, and I defer to his wisdom. But I'm just thinking it works in a local church. If you can create another little culture that is there, but how can that be done on a more extensive worldwide nature, I think becomes the question.
Well, that's really very important point you have raised, because we all know that money makes the mayor run, and predominantly we know that literature and both financial resources concerning this industry are based in the Western Hemisphere. And the global church, global South church, although they are emerging, the next future of the church is diverse. It is not monolithic. It's not Western. So that's what is going to happen. But again, when we're talking about the Lausanne 4 and the collaborative action, and as you mentioned, that we need a subculture of producing these kind of resources. Like from last 5, 6, 7 years, since my work here in USA, I am bringing Punjabi Psalms into Western notation form, just to bring in, and Calvin is helping us to spread that out. Fuller has gave us a couple of lots of this opportunity, GCAM. So there are already these platforms available. And then we have this Ethnodoxologist network, those who are investing and collaborating with these subculture of these research. But obviously it takes time, and that's what we are talking about. That we need. And Joanne, you were talking about decolonizing about this, which I mentioned already. It also go with the theological education as well as the musical worship, because there's a whole connectivity in between that, all these nuances. It's given me a kind of a notion that if you see that somebody can say that in the powerhouses, oh, Lausanne is a Western movement. It's funded, it's a concept, it's Billy Graham and everything that is more Southern kind of things, pure American. And then if you see the sponsors list, have anybody seen the sponsors list? So probably there are voices to sponsors also, that what kind of worship or what kind of, we doesn't know that. I'm just throwing speculations of all these behind the scenes possibilities. But now let's conclude to our point and conversation to our next point. How? So Ed has given us a notion of the direction. So I would like to know that, as we all know that 2050, whether it's a stats from the global Christianity, or whether it's from the mission networks, we all know that until 2050, the future of the global Christianity is non-Western. It is Latino, it's African, it's Asian, it's Indian, it's colored. Now the challenge is how people, those who have these resources, collaborate, doing collaborative action to provide a multicultural musical worship menu when they invite global church to a one table or under a one roof. That's how can they do that? That's where I would say that starting with Dr. James, and one by one, if you have any suggestion, any comment, any advice, people, those who will watch or those who will see that, what is your advice to them?
Well, let me just say one other thing that I think several of us have talked about, and that is that we do need accompanying whatever we do in the area of music and the arts, we need theological grounding for why we're doing this. And not just because we have to ground it theologically, but because it shapes the choices we make. If you have a future vision of what God would like to see God's people look like, then you have motivation for doing incremental steps toward that future. To pick up Joanne's comment, if you are looking at your neighbors sitting beside you in a room and realize that these are your brothers and sisters who bring different heart sounds and appreciations to the table, then you start to think about, well, what would it look like if we could worship in a way that included more people? I mean, so these are also important aspects of moving to a new place, that we really ground it in good theology of what God would like to see God's people look like. I would just say on how we get there, and some of you are better placed to do this than I am, but we have more technological capacity to move us forward on this than we have ever had. And I just think of one thing that we did in my home congregation 15, 20 years ago, where the worship team decided on 15 or 20 songs that we wanted our faith community to learn. And we recorded them just in our sanctuary, nothing professional, on a CD, which, if those of you who remember what those were, so CD on a CD, and we gave a free copy of that to every member of the church. People took those home, they listened to them, and over time, we ended up with a worshiping body that learned new songs, and brought them into the worship space so that it wasn't so awkward to sing something that you didn't know. We don't even need CDs anymore. Digitally, there are a million ways to help people become accustomed to new sounds, so that when they gather, Lausanne sent out a ton of documents that we were supposed to read. But when we got there, there was nothing to prepare us for the worship space. Now we can create, informal videos or whatever it is, new music scapes, where we can listen to different sounds, be prepared for that gathering, and come ready to worship. It's requirement, to listen and learn some of those new sounds, just like it would be to read statements. We now have more capacity than ever. So who knows what it'll look like in the years ahead, but it should be even easier, even on low budgets, to do what we're calling for.
Yes, excellent idea of sharing the music way in advance. And Catherine Morehouse, a fellow ethnodoxologist, she had written on my post sharing about my experience back in 2014, in 2010. And she suggested that yes, we need to be sharing this music because there's just all of this available thing. But I will say this, it was in studying ethnomusicology in a Christian context that I learned that music is not a universal language.
Mm-hmm.
It is generally understood across the world that music is a universal language. So really teaching people about music, just as I've realized we need to teach people about language so that they will understand the importance of using heart language in worship. So we will need, I think, to get into the training institutions. But I now remember why I mentioned Kat. It is because she suggested that some of us ethnodoxologists who have been having this conversation should write something, a detailed thing, the why and the how, just as we've been discussing it, and submit it and request an audience then with those who are responsible. So that something can be moved forward. Yes. So if we can write it out, it should make a difference too.
Deborah.
My thought is to, in continuation to what Joanne shared, help people see behind the song, or representation on the stage, but also where the song come from, and if by choosing and leading and singing songs, if anybody generates income, who is benefiting from the selection of the songs or performing the songs or leading songs. And many people in our community from different parts of the world don't even care about those things, obviously. But the reality is that there's actually industry who generate a significant amount of income. So as I was looking at L4 worship, musical worship, I was saddened and grieving Korean songwriters only singing already well distributed songs from Hillsong or Bethel, which will end up benefiting them economically, not Korean churches. So, and of course, I'm not saying this, in a way worship should generate income and benefit people. That's not what I'm caring about. But that's a blind spot or assumption that people don't know. For example, well, these songs are worldwidely known. That could be assumption also. There are people who don't know these songs. Worshiping community in my local community, we don't sing generic English popular worship songs as often as our original songs. So one thing that I'm personally focusing on is mutual exchange of the songs. So as a Korean person, I collect songs written in another language or originated in different parts of the world, and I translate that into Korean language and distribute among Korean congregations. So they will not only benefit from Western songs, but they will benefit from churches around the world. And it could happen in a smaller scale, or it could happen in a bigger scale within your sphere of influence. But even that, where the song come from and who generates benefit through this song, how can we reverse that? How can we even try to bring justice in that industry? That's something that I'm mindful these days.
Thank you. Deborah, yes.
Yeah. Based on the theological understanding and this thing, I also want to help people understand this. For collaboration to be successful, I think we truly need a spirit of I need you. Do you remember that phrase? During the L4 Congress, L4, it was emphasized that we should say, I need you, rather than I don't need you. However, the exclusive use of English for Western songs during worship repeatedly conveyed the message of I don't need you. Because, okay, this song is enough. So I don't need you. But for collaboration, if we want real collaboration, authentic collaboration with the global church, I think we need the true spirit of I need you. It's essential that the voice of minorities are included, which means we all rely on each other. This requires effort to ensure that the musical and artistic expression from diverse cultures are harmoniously heard and shared. So if all people, the leaders or the churches, if we understand, oh, we need you each other, I need you, this spirit, then we can collaborate, and then we will need something to make this happen.
So this is great conversation. And again, you're all the experts. And what James was talking about in investing, a set of songs into a local congregation is what I was trying to say less eloquently than he was saying. But how do you do that on a global scale so that it impacts on L5, let's say? And that's a good question, but he's right. The technology is there to do that quite simply now. But one of the things that as I listen to this, everything starts with vision. And it would be great using Lausanne, but there are other organizations. Is there a way to start and the sort of the writing a mandate statement, as Joanne talked about? Is there a way to create a manifesto, is the word I was looking for, that could be shared with the Lausanne people now? And then Eric, you're talking about who the investors are in Lausanne. Is there a way to share a manifesto vision or Lausanne share with investors that is there a way, for instance, for Lausanne to find a cooperative organization that would create a grant, a major grant process that would, and let's say that those investors are Western investors, which they probably are, but could those investors invest in people like some of you to, between now and whenever L5 comes, to start, your mandate would be to gather from other cultures and bring them, with the Western investment and vision be to go start now gathering those non-Western resources to create the kind of things that Jay Wu and James are talking about, and Joanne, to start what I was calling this other industry, something to compete or be alongside of or inside of. Wouldn't it be great if somebody inside of a Western music business could find room in their space for this another partner industry that they would be willing to invest in as well, and to share that? I don't know how that happens, but I think vision is where everything starts, and a manifesto statement that can be shared at high levels with industry, with investors, would be a great task for Eric, for you to take on as your next job in life.
Well, that's great idea. By the way,
Yeah.
and
Here am I, send Eric.
the most interesting part here is, few years ago, you probably have been observed that mostly these industrial tycoons in a worship industry, they are also denominational based. Well, if you observe GIA, Catholics,
Yeah,
we talk about Bethel, we talk about Hillsong, Pentecostals. We are talking about the other form. You will see that how the denomination background is also playing a part in these kind of things. So concerning a grant in this project, that give me a yes, that's perfect. I think I would float this idea to Jewu, to Joanne, and to me, and even if Deborah would like to join us, we can prepare and submit to Calvin Institute. We can get funding if there is a possibility, and we have friends, they know what we are doing, and we all have these kind of opportunities available. So it's all how to form a committee and then start working now. Well, since that's what I was sharing, that every year I produce 2 songs bilingually, engaging Western voices, and then the tune, the capacity, the lyrics are Pakistani Indian musicology. But when we share with our global church, it's always global voices, bilingual English refrains, and also where they can collaborate and bring them space also. Even just a month ago, I sent another mission song based on Isaiah 6 vision. It's coming, and it's English, also bilingual. It's coming before Christmas. While I'll be in November, we are producing that one. Well, on this note, I know we can carry on conversation. It's just a starting. It's just a kickstart of this conversation. Thanks to Dr. James Cravel for posting that missed opportunity, and that stirred the conversation, resulting in this. And who knows that this small seed become a large tree and a musical birds coming and nesting on that seed as well. But as we are concluding note about the future, And as we say that, it's a collaborative action call from the Lausanne 4, and let the church declare, display Christ together. How does that musical multicultural worship would be part of that declaration and display? We need to understand, as we all talked about, the future of the church is not monolithic. It is global, it is multilinguistic, not only on this earth, but in the heavenly realm. So how can we do that? I have few examples. I just throw you out and it will be surprise to you. I just read this morning, Saudi Arabia started their music program from elementary to high school. Saudi Arabia. Number two, in England, in a one county, they have started Punjabi music in their 8th grade curriculum. Spotify has a top 10, and the majority of them are non-Western songs. It's a rap, it's a hip hop, and they are the top 10 on Spotify. So Coke Studio, the corporate world, they are investing a lot in non-Western music, in a local cultural music. Coke Studio in India and Pakistan is one of the largest platform. Millions of dollars they are investing. So the call is to the church. If we really want to engage with the future of the global church, you cannot ignore music, and especially the multicultural voices of music, if we really want to reach out to the nations and be part of that. May God bless us, and through this podcast, through this conversation, there were new collaboration action spring out, and we see the fruit of our conversation. Thank you very much once again, Dr. James, Joanne, Dr. Ed, Javu, and Deborah, for your kind time. And let's the church declare, display Christ together. God bless you all.